Haywire is a 2011 film I saw in theaters. It is going to be the subject of today's cinematic atrocity. Now, when I first watched Haywire back in theaters, the movie was marketed as a sort of Jason Bourne-like spy action movie, directed by Steven Soderbergh, who is a good director. The story behind this movie is that he saw Gina Carano fighting and got inspired and wanted to make a movie with her. So they found a script and they decided to film this movie. And the result is something not that great. The movie is currently fresh on Rotten Tomatoes, but I disagree. The first time I watched this in theaters, I laughed a lot during the movie. There's just so many awkward scenes that just don't work. It's supposed to be like this serious, intense, grounded action movie, but it felt almost like a parody. And the first time I watched it, I really enjoyed it as an unintentional comedy. However, I found the DVD at like Future Shop for $5, and I thought, hey, I remember enjoying this movie a lot. And then when I watched it the second time, it wasn't that funny the second time. This is one of those movies where it's only unintentionally funny the first time you watch it. The second time it was just kind of boring. So that's one of the hits against it for a unintentionally so bad it's good viewing. So let's go on to the plot. Gina Carano plays Mallory Kane. She is a freelance specialist, a fighter, does things like get people out of bad situations, hostage rescue, things like that. She works for her ex-boyfriend Kenneth, played by Ian McGregor, and he has one more job for her, even though she doesn't want to. She wants to take a little break. She's supposed to be eye candy with this other guy, played by Michael Fassbender. The thing to mention is that this movie has a really good cast, but they're not utilized very well. So Mallory goes on this mission with MI6 agent Paul, and then she finds out that they're setting her up for something else. So she's going to have to get framed for murder, so she's got to turn the tables on her enemies. So this movie is supposed to be like this intense Jason Bourne-like movie. However, the way it's done is very awkward. First off, the music is like this sort of jazzy, sort of like weird, like art house sort of saxophone usage, and it just doesn't have the right sort of tone to go with like pulse-pounding action thriller. Also, the movie has really bad acting from Gina Carano. I know it's not fair to compare her to, Ewan McGregor, Antonio Banderas, Michael Fassbender, Michael Douglas, and like whoever else is in this film, but she is a mixed martial artist. She's not an actress. Even this is her first movie, I believe, but she's just so wooden and she has no charisma. You could literally replace her with like a mannequin during the talking scenes and then have her fight during the fight scenes. She is great in the fight scenes. Something that this movie is able to accomplish is that there are 1.5 like fight scenes that actually work. There's an opening with Channing Tatum fighting her in a diner. He actually does a better acting job than her somehow, and he's not that great. And then there's another fight in a hotel room with Michael Fassbender. This is kind of like the only jewel in the turd, so to speak. It's like, my friend Spencer once mentioned that it's almost like Soderbergh and Carano filmed this fight scene and said, hey, we should also like film a movie around this fight scene, because this fight scene is actually really great. It's like a no-hold-barred sort of fight with Michael Fassbender, Gina Carano. It's like well directed, good choreography, it's brutal. It's the only part of the movie that you take sort of seriously. Whenever Gina Carano is like punching someone, it looks great, but when she's talking about like taking a break or just any scene where she's not fighting is really boring. All right, let's move on to the awkwardness. Besides the awkward music and the main performance, everyone else in this movie is also really awkward. The movie's not that funny on the second viewing. It wasn't that funny until Mallory realizes she's framed for murder. She has to go on the run from police. And there's this amazing chase in a hotel. That's like the first scene that sort of got me into like the unintentional comedy the first time I watched it in theaters, because when you're watching a movie and it just sort of like falls apart. And okay, when a movie is supposed to be unintentionally hilarious, it's because it's trying to be one thing, but it fails. So this movie's trying to be like this sort of, you know, Jason Bourne like action thriller, but it almost seems like a parody because there are things that Mallory does in this movie that are the exact opposite of what Jason Bourne would do. There's a scene where the armed police are chasing her in a hotel room, or a hotel. So she runs through the lobby, and there are these tables that are like sort of propped in the stairwell, and she shoves them down after her, but they don't even block the stairwell. And then later she has to like scale a building the same way that Jason Bourne does in the Bourne Identity, but she falls, and like it's just so awkward because she just lays there like, oh, I've fallen, like, and then she gets up and runs, and then the finale. Okay, so basically in the finale she sets up the villain and jumps him because he's in Mexico, and he's got bodyguards, but he waves them away so he can go on a walk on the beach. And she comes up from the water in a wetsuit to attack him. And during the fight scene, they like cut to the waves. And I know what they're trying to do. They're trying to do like a, violent ocean crashing juxtaposition with like a brutal fight scene. But in the fight scene, it's Ewan McGregor, and he doesn't seem very like strong or manly, because as soon as he sees her, he tries to like run away, and like he goes to this like really rocky sheer cliff and tries to jump up, and like it's impossible for him to like jump up this cliff. And then they fight, and Gina Carano looks like a beast, and like every time he hits her, doesn't even look like she's been hit, and she's like literally like running in, like she's really like taking him apart on this beach, and they just keep cutting to like the ocean waves over and over. And it reminded me of there's a Steven Seagal movie called Marked for Death, and in that movie he takes on these Jamaican gangsters, and Steven Seagal's a pretty big guy, and in one of the fight scenes, like one of the Jamaican like henchmen like punches Seagal, and he has to like pretend that he's been hit, but it doesn't look like he's been hit. It's the equivalent of like a, he's like got to pretend that that the hit hurts when it doesn't in real life and in the movie. And the whole fight scene is just laughable. And that's not the only scene. There's so many. There's immediately after Mallory's framed for like the murder of the guy or whatever. There's just so many awkward moments. The first maybe like 20 minutes are actually serious, but there is a hilarious chase scene in the streets of like Barcelona. Yeah, there's like this extended shot of her just running, and it's supposed to be like artistic, but it's just so awkward. So Haywire is a recommendation for a so bad it's good viewing, but it's only good for one viewing. Only one viewing. I don't know how a movie like with this much talent gets so awkward, because it's not like Gina Carano did such a bad acting job that it affects everyone else's performance. It's just, in comparison, the movie's just not very well made. Steven Soderbergh, he is a good director, but he mostly does like dramas and thrillers, like a high-octane action movie isn't quite his forte, so maybe this is kind of like one of those, things he needs to work on. Other than that, Haywire is so bad it's good, but only for the first time. So if I had to give it a rating, with The Room being the highest, 10 out of 10, since you can only watch it one time, I give Haywire a so bad it's good rating of 5 out of 10.